This audio has been restored by Jen.
With the role of the Rebbe to make a kínus Tore in the days of המועד and Isur Chag, we have the honor today to have a Choshev in German, Harav Achosid, Harav Avi Ashkenazi, which will come and give us some insight into Simchas Chag. I wanted to tell you that we had two other people before him that they somehow, last minute, they told me for different reasons that they couldn't make it, and Baruch Hashem, Avi was ready, almost instant, to come and to give us some insight into Hilchas Yom Tov and Simchas Yom Tov. Harav Ashkenazi, bevakasha.
Eshkaya Harav Zalmanov. Testing. Hello, Moya. Eshkaya Harav Zalmanov. Okay, good Moya. So there's a known Yalkut Shemaini that Rebbe brings in many sichos about the word that by Sukkot we find the word Simcha 3 times in the Torah, Mashenk in the other Yamim Tovim. Some we find only one, or not even. We don't find the word Simcha. Mashenk in Sukkot we find the word Simcha. So the Rebbe will bring in many sichos the idea of Chazaka, that we have to say Good Yom Tov, Good Moed 3 times, etc. So I'm going to dedicate some time to discuss one of the aspects of Simcha that we find in Halacha as it pertains to Yom Tov and Chol HaMoed, as we'll see. So the Rebbe brings in the last Simon of Hilchas Yom Tov, Simon Tov Kuf Kuf Tes, right before Hilchas Pesach. In Seif Vav, he explains that there's an union of V'samachta b'chagecha, there's an union of Simcha by the Shalosh Regalim, including Chol HaMoed. And in Seif Zayin, he says, how do you achieve Simcha? So he explains there that back in the day when we had the Beis HaMikdash through Karban Shlamim, so eating basar, eating meat, you fulfill Simcha. But nowadays, when we don't have the Karban, unfortunately, so you have to fulfill the union of Simcha by drinking wine. And he explains there that for a man, so that's what Rebbe Paskins, that the concept of Simcha we fulfill through drinking wine on the Shalosh Regalim and Chol HaMoed. So it's also known on Haga from the Frierdiker Rebbe that he was makbid to drink wine not just on Yom Tov but on Chol HaMoed also, and it's brought down in a few sichos, and it's also brought down in the Zmaymer of Shabbos Agadol Tov Shelamed Hey, the Maimer Dibra Maskil Shir HaShirim. There the Rebbe explains the idea of Yain, how it's connected to Simcha. So there he mentions the Haga of the Frierdiker Rebbe that he would drink wine in every meal of Yom Tov, including Chol HaMoed. So they bring in the Shari Allah Minhag in Chelek Hey. I don't think it's in Shulchan Menachem. Some of the things that are in Chelek Hey, I don't think that they're all brought in Shulchan Menachem because it was a Hisafa. But they bring there from a Sikha from the Rebbe from Machen Shepesach Tavshin Lamed Aleph, where the Rebbe discusses the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim and how when the person fulfills the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, he's also fulfilling the mitzvah of Limud Torah. And the Rebbe brings different examples of when we find in Torah and mitzvahs that you're doing one action and you're fulfilling both mitzvahs at the same time. The Rebbe goes on to explain how is it not considered the Einois in mitzvahs chavilos, but the Rebbe brings a few examples that we find Benegia, this concept that we can do two things at the same time and be mekayim one thing and we mekayim two things at the same time. One example is Yetzias Mitzrayim, that we mekayim limud Torah. Another example that the Rebbe brings is also Benegia davening. We find in many places in davening that we're also citing portions of Mishnayos, etc. So you're also fulfilling the mitzvah of limud Torah, even though it's technically officially part of davening. And another example that the Rebbe brings in that sicha is Benegia drinking wine on Yom Tov. The Rebbe says that even though we have two concepts, we have the idea of making kiddush, that for Yom Tov is only midirabanan according to the Rebbe, but we also have the idea of simcha, that's minat Torah according to the Rebbe, that we have the union of drinking wine, as we just mentioned. They have to drink wine in order to fulfill simcha on Yom Tov. So the Rebbe says that too, we must say that there's no reason to say that you have to drink 2 cups of wine. But when you say kiddush on Yom Tov, when you drink the wine, you're automatically not only fulfilling the mitzvah of kiddush, of course, but also the concept of adding in simcha on Yom Tov. So that's what the Rebbe says in that sicha. The only the kudah that I wanted to point out here is that in the year before, in the sicha of Shishel Pesach Tavshin Lamed, the Rebbe, it's brought down that the Rashag asked the Rebbe, when we say the idea of basar and yain of Simchas Yom Tov, what's the shiur for that? So the Rebbe says that basar, we find a halacha that for the karbanos by Shlamim, the shiur was a kezais. You have to eat the kezais of the basar to be mekayim the mitzvah. And benigeh wine, the Rebbe also brings down that he answered that we find that wine, the Rambam paskins that if somebody drinks more than 100 views of wine, he can't paskin shaylas, etc. So the Rebbe says that shura is also kezais, revis. So you have to drink a revis of wine. So what comes out from these two places is that enoch inami, you can fulfill your mitzvah of simcha when you drink wine by Yom Tov, not just kiddush but also the idea of simcha. But you have to make sure that you drink a revis. For kiddush, not necessarily you need to drink a revis, whatever you want to call it. But if you want to just use that same kois that you're using for kiddush to be mekayim the mitzvah of simcha, you should drink the entire revis. Now, just a quick nakuda going back to what the Rebbe said, that we don't find a reason to say that you cannot be mekayim simcha and kiddush in the same cup. I saw in some starting they actually bring us a reason, a makir to say, actually, as a matter of fact, that enoch inami, that you could fulfill those two things. We find in the Gemara and Psachim, in that Kuf Ches Amud Beis, the halacha is not so practical nowadays, but back in the days, and you know, the wine had to be diluted because it was very strong. And the halacha, the Gemara discusses that if you didn't dilute the wine, so you're not necessarily mekayim mitzvahs dalit kaisis, etc. So the Gemara there says that shon chai yotza, that if you drink the wine pure, meaning it was undiluted, it was not mixed with water, etc. So you're yotzed. Amar Avraham says yidei yain yotza, yidei chedus lo yotza. And both the Rashbam, Pirush Rashbam, and the Teshuvos there explains what does it mean that you yotza yain. So they explain there that you yotzed the simcha of Yom Tov. So it's mashma from here. Some say that enoch inami, you could use the case of kiddush to fulfill also the mitzvah of simcha. We see that sort of a proof here from this Gemara, the way that the Mefarshim explain. Now, this that we brought from the Rebbe in Shari Allah Minhag, from the Achrosh to Pesach Atosh Lamed Aleph, that you could fulfill the simcha together with the wine of kiddush, is all benegir the inyan of simcha of Yom Tov. Now, when it comes to the Yom Tov, we find a different nekuda, which is actually the beginning of the simon that I quoted before. That's the inyan of einig. The Rebbe begins the simon by saying that the same way that we have a mitzvah of kavod and einig by Shabbos, this is the first simon in Ilkei Shabbos, Rishon Beis. So too, we find by Yom Tov that you have the chiyuv of being the kabed Yom Tov and also to have einig of Yom Tov. And then the Rebbe goes to explain what is considered kavod, what is considered einig. And then in Seif Gimel, he explains that what's the einig that Chachamim said you have to have on Yom Tov. So you have to eat 2 meals on Yom Tov, by night and by day. And of course, if it falls on Shabbos, you have to have also the shlishis. But Yom Tov, b'derech klal, if it's on a weekday, you don't have a chiyuv of a 3rd meal. And then in Seif Daled, the Rebbe goes on to explain that the yikar ha'seuda hu lechem asher orecho, that you have to eat bread in order to fulfill the idea of eating a seud on Yom Tov. Not to go into so many details benegir Shabbos, and then he mentions benegir wine as follows: the tzarich lekvea kol seuda layayin, that you have to fulfill and you have to establish each meal on wine. The hainu sheish the yain be'emtza seudasei, meaning that you have to drink wine in the middle of your meal. Email the masegas if you have the means, etc. And then it says v'yad be'dvos v'yayin u'medonis if you halt, you can also add meat and wine if you can. But we find this idea of einig and Yom Tov that besides for the inyan of simcha that we were mentioning until now, there's a separate independent point of drinking wine during the meal in order to be mekayim the idea of einig Yom Tov. And I said that's what many achreidim also bring down, that the by Yom Tov, this inyan, the mechaber brings down the idea of drinking wine during the meal. Many achreidim explain that it means you can't fulfill with the wine of kiddush. It has to be during the meal after you wash the mitzvah. You have to drink some wine to be mekayim this idea of einig. And that's actually the Kasav Mishnah on the Rambam. It says clearly that you don't fulfill the idea of einig with the wine of kiddush. This yain that we're talking about here, this takon of einig of Yom Tov, is in addition to the wine that you use for kiddush. So, bottom line, until now, what we're saying is that enoch inami, based on what the Rebbe said, that for the idea of simcha, you could fulfill the simcha by drinking at least a revis of yain when you make kiddush. But when it comes to the concept of einig, there's an additional wine that you have to drink during the meal. And for that, it's not so clear if you need to drink another revis, or even if with a little bit of wine during a meal, you already fulfill the idea of einig. I didn't search about this. Okay, so going from here, just a few more nekudas in this inyan. So in the Sikha, I quoted 2 sikhs here, but Sikha of Akrosh Pesach Toshin and Tes, the Rebbe brings a concept here that this idea that you have to drink wine for Simcha, the Rebbe says there, he's explaining why was it that the Dalet Koises for Sudas Mashiach was misaken to be taken specifically during the Sudas Mashiach. The Rebbe says that for the idea of Simcha and Yom Tov, it doesn't have to be at all during the meal. You can just, after the meal in the afternoon or whatever, at night, you can just drink a little bit of reviz of Yain, this is what we said, and then you make kind of the idea of Simcha of Yom Tov. It doesn't have to be necessarily during a meal. So then the Rebbe explains why is it by Sudas Mashiach we find that the 4 cups have to be taken by a meal. You have to wash the matzah and then you drink the 4 cups of wine. But in the principle, the idea of Simcha of Yom Tov, when you drink the wine, it does not have to be in the meal at all. So that's another distinction that we find in the idea of Simcha and the Einig has to be daket by the meal. In the idea of Simcha, it could be any time during Yom Tov, as long as you are able to drink that time after Kiddush, etc. Then there's another sikha here from sorry, not a sikha, but a conversation of the first night of Pesach, Tafshin Chav Tes. And someplace it says it was also, I don't know, or maybe it's a mistake, and it was or on the second day of Pesach, Tafshin Lamed, where the idea of saying L'chaim by the Leila Seder, we know there's just the Harab Alma that the Rebbe says there. He was asked why is it the minhag the Frierdiker Rebbe? The Rebbe also said this minhag not to say L'chaim by Leila Seder during the Shulchan Aruch, and the Rebbe said that the Frierdiker Rebbe would drink wine, even though, because it says in Allah, you're allowed to drink wine between the second and third kodesh, you're allowed to drink wine during the meal, but he would not say L'chaim, and the Rebbe explains there, because the idea is that if you say L'chaim during the Seder by the meal, it's going to look as if you're adding to the Dalet kodesh, and we don't want to make a distinction and make a sort of an announcement that we're drinking another cup, and it's going to look as if we're adding to the 4 cases of Dalet cases on Pesach, and say that Leila Seder, so therefore he would not say L'chaim, and the Rebbe's minhag was also like that, I believe. But they yes would drink a cup of wine during the meal, and similarly to this, we find also B'negei Rosh Hashanah this minhag the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe also not to say L'chaim, not to say Negunim, and either the night meal of Rosh Hashanah, the first day, the second day is different discussion of when that applied, but just the Hayat B'negei that as well. Now we also find that in different sikhs where the Rebbe brings this concept in general, the Shita of the Rebbe. So in the sikh of the second base of Sukkot, second day of Sukkot, Tafshin Tezayin, the Rebbe brings the Salacha that the Rebbe brings B'negei Simcha, that you have Ein Simcha L'Bayayin, and there the Rebbe, it's in a Muga, but there in the sikh it says, the Rebbe said it's mashma from the Rebbe that the union of drinking wine on Yom Tov is Midei Raisa, and because nowadays we don't have Basar Shlamim, like we mentioned earlier. And the Rebbe adds there that in addition to the Chiyuv of Kiddush, you also have the idea of Simcha. So it's not a stira to what we said earlier, just that the Chiyuv is an additional Chiyuv, but again, you can still fulfill with the wine of Kiddush as long as you drink the Reviz. And in the footnote there, they point out that the reason for this minhag of Shtiyas Yayin, this is the reason to the minhag Yisrael that he brings there. It's a nacham bilti muga, but he brings there that's the reason that why the minhag became that we drink wine and also b'teicha seuda. So I don't know exactly how to connect this with the two distinctions. The distinction that we were saying till now, that b'teicha seuda mainly specifically pertains to Einig. The simcha you can do it any time, and we said even not by the Suda, not before the Suda, not after the Suda, but here he brings this down. And there's another sikha here from, it's the same night as the night, it's early based, the Chol HaMoed Sukkos, Tafshin Yutes, where there the Rebbe doesn't say mashma, it was 3 years after the sikha that we just mentioned. There the Rebbe says clearly that there's a machlekes adishenim, if the union of simcha of Yom Tov through wine is midrabanan or midiraisa, and the Rebbe paskins like the Rambam and other rishonim hold that midiraisa nowadays, even though we don't have basar shlamim, but because we don't have the basar, so we fulfill the mitzvah of simcha through wine, but that's a mitzvah of Isa min Torah. So that's what the Rebbe says there, and then the Rebbe also adds there that this is also the yisoid, this is also the base for the minhag that we find by the Frierdiker Rebbe, which we mentioned above, that he was particular to make sure to drink wine all the days of Yom Tov, even on Chol HaMoed, like it says in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, that the idea of kavod and einig does not apply to Chol HaMoed, but it does apply to the simcha does apply to Chol HaMoed. So again, the here he's talking about simcha, that it applies for Yom Tov and also for the days of Chol HaMoed, because By Chol HaMoed, we don't have Mikra Kodesh, even though that it has a hara in the Shabbos that we do find Mikra Kodesh by Karbanos. But when it comes to the idea of saying that you have chayav of all the things of Kavod and Oineg, it does not apply to Chol HaMoed. It only applies to Yom Tov, and Yom Tov includes Rosh Hashanah, because by Rosh Hashanah we have Mikra Kodesh. Mashenkin, as the Rebbe explains here in the Siman to Tov Kuf Chavtes, we find something that we have on Chol HaMoed, but not in Rosh Hashanah, which is the inyan of Simcha. And then that's why we have this inyan of drinking wine specifically on Chol HaMoed to fulfill the idea of Simcha. But we don't necessarily find B'nai Rosh Hashanah. It's a separate the discussion of Bichlal and Rosh Hashanah. There's the concept of Simcha, to buy clothing for your wives, etc. But here we're focusing more on the drinking of the wine. Just to conclude, I want to add one more discussion related to this, which is that some Malaktim, they bring from the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah brings in, this is in Hilchos Seudah. So there's the whole discussion, it applies every Shabbos, when you make Kiddush on wine and then you wash for Amotzi, when you drink wine in the middle of the meal, if you have to say Hagafen or not. The Maaseh that brings is that the Yain of Kiddush is Koilel, the Yain that you drink to say Chasuda, so you don't have to say Hagafen again in the wine that you're going to drink in the middle of the meal. But here in Simon Kufayin Daled, the Mishnah Berurah brings in Sivkot Naches as follows. He's talking about this halacha, Chein Yain Shav Kiddush, and then at the end he writes that in our countries, when the minhag is that we don't drink wine in the middle of the meal, even on Shabbos, so there he said the halacha is that the wine that you're going to drink during the meal is you only don't have to say the bracha if you had it in mind when you said hagafen by kiddush. Mashenkin b'stam, if you didn't have kavana, it does not exempt the bracha of hagafen that you have to say for the wine during the meal. The reason being because they say no, it says that the minhag in our places is that we're not used to drinking wine in the middle of the meal. So many acharim bring this Mishnah Berurah, and we also find interestingly enough the Shach Yeridiyah Siman Shimem Aleph. It's a siman about Aninus, and there the Shach and Sivkot and Zayin. So it said there's a long list in the Mechaber about different things that an Einan can do or cannot do. And the Mechaber writes there, V'chol shekin b'yom tov. No, I missed I don't have it here, but it says there about the drinking. I believe drinking wine on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and the Rama adds im yirtzeh. I think that's the words of the Rama. And on that the Shach says the kemashu miskav lemitzvah, and then he says at the end that the idea of drinking wine by Shabbos and Yom Tov is not a chiyuv. There's no chiyuv to drink wine on that meal. Only if you want. It's a reshus. If you want, you can drink it. So that's how it plays into role also in the halachas of Aninus. So some acharim say the lemaisa, they pass in the lemaisa nowadays, because the minhag is that we don't drink wine during a meal, so you don't have so much of a chiyuv even on Yom Tov. I mean, the Mishnah Berurah talks about Shabbos. The minhag is that by Cholev and by Shabbos we don't have this concept of drinking wine. But some acharim write that for that reason you don't have so much of the chiyuv that we mentioned earlier from Dalton Abbott to drink wine to fulfill the idea of eineg during the meal. But just want to conclude by saying here that Dalton Abbott in this Simon Kofain Dal, I just want to also mention that the proof of the Mishnah Berurah he brings in Sharat Tzion is from the Gemara. There's a Gemara about the story of I think it was Abaye, that he came and the Gemara says it was on Yom Tov, and the Rashi explains that the idea of Yom Tov. So he brings sort of a certain proof that the Medina Seino, it's like 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, the times of the Gemara. It's also the minhag was not to drink wine during the meal. But Lamaisa Dal Rebbe does say in Simon Kufayin Dalet Seif Hey, he says like this: Im shos yayin b'fnei suda. If you drink wine before the meal, filu kodem shekava atzmi b'suda. Even if it was before you started to set the meal. He says here, but generally speaking, if a person does not have any kavanah, it's not considered as if you change your mind. And now he says, because it is a common thing to drink wine even during the week, even during a regular day. It is a common thing to drink wine during the meal. So regardless of what we brought before from the Mishnah Berurah or from other sources, it appears that according to the Alter Rebbe, the minhag nowadays, even during the week, it is to set and to drink wine during the meal. So it would come out that for Yom Tov also we have the concept of, again, just to summarize, we have the idea of simcha, that you can fulfill with a place of kiddush if you want to, but as long as you drink reviz, as we brought. But also there's an additional way to drink wine specifically during the meal. And then again, this is for Yom Tov, and then the Chol HaMoed, you also have the idea of drinking wine to fulfill the idea of simcha. There you don't have necessarily the inyan of eineg, because it does not apply to Chol HaMoed, but we do have the inyan of simcha to drink, again, a reviz of a yain there's a discussion if you have to do night and day. The Maisa said many write that the union of Simcha only applies once the whole day is late. So if you do at night, you don't have to do it by day, or if you do by day, you don't have to do the previous night. This different discussions in which pratim this applies to, but in Yabasar, Yain, or other non that we find the same for the Yom Tov. And then we stopped these other nekudas that we didn't get a chance to discuss, but there's discussion if you can fulfill the union of Simcha by drinking grape juice instead of wine, if the grape juice would suffice, especially for somebody who can't. But also the concept of Leish Basukkah, we know that the Dachol we only say Leish Basukkah when drinking wine for a Kasher Bracha, either Kiddush or Havdalah. Now if you're just drinking wine stam in the Sukkah, if you didn't eat Mazenes, etc. And also the what's Bifrat Negia for Pesach, when often people make Kiddush before they want to wash and start their meal, so the idea of drinking another Revis of Yain to be fulfilling the Kiddush B'Mokim Suda, which also plays into role to hold the discussion about this, and then again the Simcha of Rosh Hashanah, which we spoke about. So just want to conclude that hopefully there should be Yehiratzin that we will be zeichet to sit in the Sukkah of Eidish of Levi Yosef together with the Sheira Boyer and Levi Yosef and the Yanim Meshumah in this year.